At this point in the project, I'm going to show you how I'm going to secure the cylinder to the cart. I've cut a piece of metal strip like this. It's got a bunch of holes and I fitted it around the cylinder just like this. And on one side I bent it in like that, and on the other toward the other way. So it's going to go just like this. Just going to go like that. And on the left hand side is where this end goes. It's going to be bolted right over here. And on this side I'll put a bolt and then a knob here so that I can tighten up the cylinder nice and tight. And now I'm going to drill a 5/16 hole. And what I've got here is a 1-inch 5/16 bolt. I'm going to put it in through the rear. Now I'm going to put the strapping in. I'm going to put a flat washer and a lock washer, and I'll put the nut on. And now I'm just going to tighten it up. Make sure you keep the strap nice and horizontal like this. And on the other side I drilled the hole as well, but over here the bolt is not permanent. I installed a knob like this from a snowblower or a lawnmower, then I can just release it or turn it out. And then the clip will come loose, or you can get it right off. And then take your cylinder off. So when you want to replace the cylinder, you just take it off, put a new cylinder in, and then stick it back in and put the knob back on. All that this is a 5/16 carriage bolt. It's approximately 2 inches. And then I just put it back on and tighten it up until the tank is nice and secure. And it's good. That tank's not going to move or fall off at all. Now at this point I'm going to fix the front of the rack over there on top. I'm going to put a piece of metal right across here. But before I get started, I just noticed that it's a 1/4 inch more in at the end here than over here. It's 8.5 inches across here, and it's 8 1/4 over there. So probably when I welded, the metal kind of warped back in. So I'm going to knock in a piece of wood right over here to make it 8.5 inches before I weld the end piece. I'm just going to work it down. And now I've got the same measurements, which is good. Once I've got the metal piece welded here, I know it's going to stay in place, then I can remove the block of wood. Here's a piece of metal I prepped to put at the end over here. I would have preferred having a straight piece of flat bar like this, but this is all I had. It's much lighter. It's not going to require too much pressure on it because it's just for the handle. But here's how it's going to go, in like this. So at this point I'm going to give it a few tacks and then weld it all up. Okay, now I'm done welding that front piece, and I've ran my grinder with the flat disc over the welds to make it look nice and smooth. And here's where I'm at in the project currently. The next step will be to make the handle at the front here and then put a top here. Here I've got my handle made up. I welded some flat bar metal onto a piece of metal like this. This is 2 inches long. It's going to give me a lot of room to pull the handle even if I have my gloves on. So at this point I'm going to make the welds nice and smooth by using my angled grinder and a flat disc, and I'll be right back with that. Okay, I just finished grinding it off, and you may want to make the edges nice and smooth as well, so I just ran the flat disc for a few seconds on the edges here. And now I'm ready to weld it onto the cart. And it's going to go approximately over here, but first I got to measure all the edges to make sure it's nicely centered. What I've done is put on a C-clamp to hold it on while I weld it. And you want to make sure you measure each end to make sure it's even. And then you're ready to weld it on. So what I've done is I've welded the top over here, the sides, and just underneath on both sides. And on the insides I just put a little tack on each side. And that's going to be strong enough for that handle. And now even with my gloves on, it's easy to move around. And you'll notice there's plenty of room there, even if you have a thick pair of gloves on. So the next step in the project will be to get a piece of metal plate to go all around the top here. I'm probably going to use a 1/8 steel plate or 1/4 inch, and it's going to have to be 20 inches long by 12 inches and 3/8. Now I don't have any metal plating sitting around my shop, so I'm going to go to Brendan at Get Bent Metal. That's his YouTube channel and the name of his business, and I'll meet you right there. I'm at Get Bent Metal here. Here's Brendan to get that piece of sheet metal for my platform, and he's getting it ready there for the plasma cutter. Visualize here. So there's my piece. Perfect cut. Thanks a lot, man.
No problem.
And you guys can check out his channel. It's Get Bent Metal. And I'll put the link to his channel under this video. So I'm back in the shop with my metal plate, and I'm going to stick it on my cart. And I'm going to fire up the MIG welder and tack it on. And I'm not going to put full weld beads all the way around. I'm just going to put little strips of welds, because I don't need to fully weld it all around for it to be nice and solid on there. And here's the first bead on there. And you may want to put a few clamps just to keep the metal plate nice and tight on the metal. So here's the welds I put on there. And I did this at the front and the same thing on the side over here. So I'm going to let this cool down and then use the flap disc and make them nice and smooth again. Okay, I've got all the welds grinded with the flap disc, and this is what I've got. So I made it nice and smooth. You don't want to take off too much because you can end up weakening your welds. So always make sure you've got metal that's on both pieces that you welded together. And it's like this at the back as well. So now I've got to put both my welders on the cart to see how it's going to fit and to drill the holes so that I can mount them on the cart. So I've got the welders on. It's going to give me a good idea if I need to change anything on the cart. I may make some kind of little hanger here to wrap some cables around. And at the front here, I'm thinking of making a little rack to put in some welding rods and the welding hammer and stuff like that, and maybe the cables from the stick welder in there as well. So I got to look around the shop and outside, see what kind of metal I've got left so I can do that. Now what I've also done is position the stick welder exactly where I want it on the cart, and with the Sharpie I'm just going to mark the holes here right onto the cart, because then I'm going to be drilling small holes there for bolts or screws. So there's 4 altogether on this welder, and there's 1 small tab on each side at the rear as well, and I'm going to mark them. So I've got the MIG welder positioned exactly where I want it, and I'm going to reach in where I've opened the door, and I'm going to mark with a marker over here where I want a hole to be drilled. On the other side of the welder, it's a different story because you have to take this apart to reach the other hole, And if you do take the cover off, it's just full of stuff so you can't reach. That's where the hump is underneath. There's a hole through there. So what I'm going to do instead is drill a hole through the top and grab into the plastic foot over here and put a bolt. It's just a lightly secured. It probably will never fall even if I never secured it to the cart, but I'm doing it just to be safe. So that's all I'm going to do on this side. So to do that, just lift the welder up and then mark right underneath. Now what I've decided to do is put a piece of pipe over here so that I can put my welding nozzle in there, just like that. So this pipe here is about 1 inch or 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is weld it back here. So I've got the tube welded for my nozzle. So that's done. Now over here I'm going to put a small piece of pipe and a piece of metal that goes across. Won't be this big. I'm going to cut it. This will be to wrap the cables around. So I got to go measure this out, cut it out, and then weld it on. So I'll just put my piece of pipe in the middle. And approximately I want it this big. So for the end, I'm just going to put a can here and trace it out. And do the same on this side. So this should be big enough. And I'll just cut this off and then weld it on. So I've cut the edges off with my grinder. Now I'm just going to go on my bench grinder and round off the edges over here. Okay, so here's my piece. It's good enough for me. Now I'm just going to center this piece of pipe and weld it on there. Okay, so I got the pipe welded and now I mounted it on the cart with a clamp over here, and now all I'm going to do is weld it onto the cart. So that's all welded. It's pretty hot right now. One tip when you're welding in a garage, make sure that your doors are opened from side to side so that the fumes can flow right through. It doesn't work really good if you only have one door open. You have to have 2 doors.